It's time for another Dice Tower review with Zee Garcia.
Hey everybody, today I'm taking a look at a small card game, a card drafting game and sort of tableau building game called Skyward here. It's made from a company called Rule and Make, distributed here in the United States anyway, by Passport Game Studios. And the game, as I said, is a game in which you are going to be flipping over some cards. You are going to be making different groups of those cards and then divvying them up. It's a nice split you choose mechanism in which the one making the split gets last pick from the different piles you've made. And the theme in the game is that you are all working to build a city that rests atop the clouds. It's a skyward city, and you are going to be building the buildings in it and then launching them into the air to become part of said city. It's a very quirky theme, very cutesy theme as well. Lots of cute little cartoon characters and sort of got that look to it. Let me show you how the game works. We'll come on back and I'll tell you if I think it's a good I Split You Choose and tableau building game. Setting up the game is very, very easy. You're going to shuffle up the deck of cards, make a pile of these cog tokens, set out the warden token, and you pick a start player who gets the warden token, and then you are ready to begin. The objective of the game, of course, is to get the most victory points, and you are going to be getting those victory points from these cards here. The cards will have a little shield, most of them will. That's how many victory points you get, and sometimes they'll have another scoring condition below that, which might also afford you some points. So, to start the game, we're going to be playing here a two-player game. Let's say I'm the one splitting the cards. Okay, so each round goes like this. I'm going to draw a number of cards depending on the number of players. So for two players, I draw 8 cards. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I know you can't see those, so I'll scoot this up a little bit so you can take a look at what I've drawn here. And then I am going to, once I've revealed the necessary cards, I'm going to split them into piles of cards equal to the number of players. So I'm going to make two groups here. And I can do this however I want to. I'm also going to be adding the warden token to one of the piles. That does two things. It's going to decide who the next starting player is, and it gives them a cog, which I'll talk about in just a sec, but it's basically a wild resource. So, as you can see, there are generally two kinds of cards here, and in fact, I'll move this one down so it's even more apparent that there are two kinds. You have up here the factions, and those are basically the ones that are going to be working for you. They are going to build the things that you are deploying in the game, and so the resources provided by them will in turn become these cards down here, paying for the cost at the top of the card there. The other cards are generally buildings, but not always. Sometimes you have vehicles, like this one is an airship here, that's a vehicle. And sometimes you have critters, like pigeons, which are usually bad in the game because they make a mess of everything. And so I'm going to split things however I want to here, and I'm not going to think about it too much for right now. I'm just going to make a pile here, like so. And the other pile is going to be this. And I'll put the warden token there. So there are my two options. Those are the two piles I have made. And so since I split them, my opponent is going to pick first. So the other players would go around the table. I get last pick. So my opponent's going to go. They're going to take this pile here. They'll take the warden token. They get a cog with that, and they keep their hand for just 1 second. I get the other pile. And now we go to the second phase in the turn, which is actually playing cards, all right? The player who has the warden token now would lead that phase, and so they'll play some cards. And so, let's take a look at that. I'm going to put my hand down for just a second. My opponent here has a couple of buildings. They have a droid factory. They have a cloud network. Those two things, again, have costs, and they have these two cards which are going to allow them to pay for the buildings and other kinds of cards like that. And so they are going to play out this card. This will be the first thing they play out. The cost is one of the yellow resources which come from these maker robots, and then 2 of anything. There's 2 sort of wild symbols. Those can be fulfilled by any kind of resource. And so they'll pay 1 for the yellow, the other one, yellow here, for the anything, and then the cog would be the last payment there. This goes out in front of them. They discard that, they discard these. This card they hold in their hand, and then it comes back to me, and now I can do the same thing. Now, if you get any cards that have the lightning symbol here in the bottom corner, those actually automatically go to the board for me, and so that one wouldn't even have gone into my hand. It automatically goes to the table, and I just play it. And then for the rest of these, I, as of right now, could play this because this one gives me 1 blue symbol, this one gives me 2 of the blue symbols, and this one takes 2 blue and 1 of anything. So sure, I could play this by discarding both of these cards. Comes into play. This building here happens to have a when you launch it ability, and that is that I may launch a blue building, another blue building, without paying its cost. So perhaps launching it right now was not the best idea. Maybe hanging on to it and launching it when I have another blue building in my hand would have been a little more beneficial. But for the sake of the argument here, we'll just keep on going. Now we go to the next round, in which this player, the one who ended up with the Warden token, will draw, again, 8 cards, split them. I choose, they choose last. Whoever has the Warden token at that point plays, the other player plays. And we continue doing this until the game is over, which is when someone has 6 buildings. You wrap up that round, and you count up your victory points. That's it. It's a very straightforward game. A couple of other things I want to talk about here. You can, after you've played, you have a hand limit. You have a hand limit of 6 cards, but you can discard 3 cards to gain a cog. And in fact, you could discard 6 cards and gain 2 cogs, which you very well might do near the end of the game, especially. But you can carry over cards from round to round, up to 6 cards. Besides that, there are a few other cards in the deck here which might or might not be beneficial. So we have another airship there, but you're also going to find sometimes in here that there are those aforementioned pigeons. And the pigeons are one of the instant cards, meaning as soon as you get it, just like the airship, it goes into your air space here. And it says that for each pigeon that you have is actually a -2, as can be seen there in the little shield. But it says below that if you instead have a rookery, then each pigeon is actually good for you. They're each going to be worth 1 victory point. So you might or might not get the rookery. It might or might not even show up in the game. But pigeons are generally not a good card to take, so they'll devalue the group they're with unless someone already has the rookery at the table. And you need to take that into consideration as you are splitting the piles. That's largely the game. There are a few different effects on the cards. Some, as you saw, happen one time when they come into effect, when you play the card, when you launch the card. Some continue working. It's just sort of an always-on effect, like this one says that while the droid factory is in your airspace, you gain 1 cog when you launch a yellow or a green building. That's a fantastic power. And some have victory point powers, like this one with a little flag there denoting, hey, look at me at the end of the game. This one says it's worth 3 victory points. It's a dry dock. And it says you get another victory point for each blue or, I guess that's pink or purple, blue or purple building in your airspace. So if you play this out, especially if you play this out early, you really want to focus on those blue and purple buildings. And so what you play will sort of dictate where you want to go, how you manage your hand of cards, which pile you take, etc. That's pretty much the game. Very straightforward. Besides what you're seeing here, the game does come with 2 little expansions. Legions here, and these which are called Discord. And so these, it's 2 12-card little decks, and you can add these to change up the game a little bit. The usual rules is you shuffle some of them into the deck, and when they show up, they show up. But I prefer to play with the variants listed in the rule book, which is for the Allegiance cards, you shuffle them up, everybody gets 3, and then you keep 1. And then at any point during the game, if you have played cards into your airspace that satisfy these symbols, so in this case this is not a cost you pay, it's actually sort of a threshold you meet, then you can play this card as well for 7 victory points. And then the other one, the Discord, same thing. Instead of shuffling them in the way that the rulebook suggests you can do it, if you want a little more predictability, is simply shuffle these up, put them aside, and then each round of splitting, just add one of these into the split. And these give you some sort of instant power. They're very good, very powerful, but at the end of the game, whoever has the most of these is going to lose 4 victory points. People are tied, they all lose 4 victory points. So that's how that works. These are interesting, certainly not necessary, and you can play the base game quite a bit without even considering those, but they are in the box and you can throw them in right away. So that's it. Draft the right cards, play out to your tableau, to your airspace, the correct combinations, try to get the most victory points, and you're the winner of the game. All right, so there you have it. That is Skyward. Let's take a look at our target audience system here, starting with the first T for thematic ties. The game has a cool theme. I like the theme a lot. I think it's approachable. I think it's cute, but it's fairly thin. It doesn't really affect much of anything. But I like it. I'm glad this is the theme, and I like the idea of the pigeons sort of, being like the rats of the air, sort of polluting your buildings. You have a lot of interesting sort of concepts here. They even go into the different factions in the game a little bit in the rule book. So I like it. It's not you're not going to feel like you're building a city in the sky, but I like that because there's not a lot of mechanisms to it. It's a fairly straightforward, mechanically speaking, game. And the theme makes for some really cool artwork, which we're going to talk about right now in aesthetics. The look is fantastic. I love the cartoony nature of the whole thing. I like the art style in it a lot. I like the different factions having a little bit of a different feel, and so the art enhances that for me. And then construction quality of the game is very well done. Everything's well made. Cards are good quality. The whole thing is excellent. Even the insert is very simple but well designed. Replayability here, which also has scalability in it for me. The game has a lot of replayability in it, but I don't think it scales very well. I don't want to play with more than 2 pretty much ever again because the downtime is severe. Even with 2 players, you are going to take some time splitting 8 cards and the Warden token into 2 piles that make sense. This is what I want. I want to make sure there's something in the other pile my opponent wants that isn't so good I'm just handing the game over. And that is just compounded when you play with 3 people. And then again when you play with 4, you have to split 16 cards. So much downtime. Do not think the game scales well at all. But it's a great 2-player game. Game length, it's pretty quick, it's good, it's speedy, you get up to it pretty quickly. You usually won't have the stuff you need to launch a building in the very first go, but you don't sit around collecting things and just sort of waiting all the time either. I like that sometimes you need a downturn to then come back the next turn and deploy something really cool. Or sometimes you'll just burn a bunch of cards out of your hand because you need those gears for the next turn making a big play. So it's got a good cadence to it. The ease of play, which involves fiddliness and age appropriateness, all those things, I like it a lot. I think it's a fairly easy game to play. I don't find the game to be fiddly. I think there's very few moving parts, really. The texts are there, but they're not convoluted. Nothing seems bizarre. There's one building that is... when you build it, you then pick a player and they trade a building with you. You don't trade a building with them. They pick the building they give you. And the building's not that cheap, though. So that one's a little iffy for me because I just usually end up dumping that card for part of a set for gears, for cogs. But if someone has a single building that's great, I guess then it makes sense to build it, but it's sort of a corner case. Don't really like that card. Doesn't matter. It's still not fiddly. And the game with the age appropriateness of it, if your kids can play it, then go ahead and play it because there's nothing here that's really objectionable. So I like that about it as well. And then lastly, tactics and strategy. And this involves luck, of course. There is a good amount of tactical play in the game. But there is luck in it. Certainly, you're flipping over cards. You are, if you happen to end up with a couple of pigeons, let's say, and the rookery does not come out, and it's likely to not come out in a two-player game. Maybe not likely, but it could happen because you're not going through as many cards in a two-player game. Then you're just stuck with some negative points. But that translates for me into a little bit of a push your luck. So I like that as well. So the whole thing really is a super pleasant surprise for me. This is one that looked good, but I wasn't sure if it was going to be a good game. And I have really, really enjoyed this one. I think it's such a straightforward but engaging game. The whole package really sings to me. I like the theme. I like the gameplay. I like that the turns are so quick. Again, with two players. It's a fantastic two-player game. With more than that, I personally would not recommend it. But at two players, for a quick, I split, you choose, drafting sort of light combo building kind of game, I really enjoy this one. So this one's going to get a seal of excellence from me. I like it that much, and I would certainly recommend you check it out. I'm keeping this one. This is a great, great little game. Seal of excellence from me. That is Skyward.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.